And that was pretty much my stage of evolution until one spring evening in 1988. That night, PBS was running clips from moments of the Civil Rights Movement. It was in commemoration of the 20th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King. I had seen these scenes on the evening news when I was growing up in Mississippi. Blacks marching down the middle of Main Street of some hot and dusty town in my home state. I could smell the thick, humid air, the sweat, the dust prickled my nose. But this time, as an adult, I observed something I had never seen before. Instead of focusing on the marchers, I noticed the white people who lined the streets, throwing rocks, cheering, waving Confederate flags. My people. And again I studied the marchers. And then it hit me. For the first time I saw the whole picture. This is not black history, I thought. This is my history. And I know nothing about it. I know nothing about how it shaped me. These people, white and black, and especially that unspoken space between us, made me who I am. And I am ignorant of my own story. The American history with which I was presented was a lie, a sin of omission. And I realize that every day, as a white man, I shape and am shaped by race, but was never taught words for it. It was like that curtain holding half of my soul from me suddenly lifted. I remember Joe in his silence, and it was clear to me that I owed Joe a tremendous debt. And I still can't begin to fathom what his mandatory silence cost him that day, but I am beginning to understand how his invisibility was used to underwrite my sense of privilege, to embellish my history. His dignity, his humanity was the price extracted so that a 6-year-old child could feel superior. The shock of looking the sacred truth in the face was great. It was so great I broke down in tears. It was the closest I've ever come to having what they call a transformational experience. The goals that I had been working for, money, power, and success, seemed trivial, artificial, even repugnant, all based on lies I had been told about being a white man. These were the privileges of being on the right side of the curtain. I became certain that I would never understand my own story until I went behind the curtain and discovered Joe's. He and I held missing pieces of each other's narrative. And for our stories to be complete, our stories would have to include each other. His story is my story, and my story is his. We made each other. We co-authored each other's story. We created race together. I'm not the first white man who's come to the conclusion that much of our personal history is based on myth or facts of convenience and entitlement. In America, we've all been traumatized by race, and the stories we tell about ourselves are both fractured and contradictory. I decided that for me to be whole, I needed to get into Joe's head, not for his salvation, but mine. He holds a piece of my soul, and Joe's silence made me who I am. The next day, I read a feature article in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune entitled, "Is the Dream Still Alive?" And in it were quoted several personalities across the country. And they were asked about the health of Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. One woman cited was Fannie Smith, the mayor of Falcon, Mississippi, a delta town of 300 people. Mayor Smith was African-American, eloquent, and she was my age exactly. I had found my starting place. After calling several numbers in the area, I found someone who knew Mayor Smith. Since the town was so small, and with no budget for a salary, her real job was running the Happy Sack convenience store. And that's where I first spoke to her. "Mayor Smith," I began, "you don't know me, but I'm a white guy who grew up in the same state that you did, at the same time, but in an entirely different world. And I've come to believe that the story I was told about who I am as a white man is pretty much fiction. And I think that the story of you would help me understand where the blank spaces are. Would you be willing to tell me about growing up in Mississippi? Do you have stories to tell?" And she laughed. "Do I have some stories? You got a week?" I caught a plane to Memphis, rented a car, and drove down to Falcon. The town was a collection of falling down shacks and open sewers. passed a peeling cinder block structure with a police car sitting up on blocks in front. Somebody had hand-painted City Hall over the door, and the door was locked. I found Miss Smith, Mayor Smith, at the happy sack behind the counter. She turned the register over to her brother and led me to the storeroom in the back. We talked for a couple of hours. Miss Smith was charming and eloquent and a realist. Remembering the poverty as I drove into Falcon, I asked her how much things had really changed since King had come through here. She responded, well, I'll put it this way. I'm black and I'm the mayor of this town. Before the 60s, that would be impossible. But then again, this town only has 300 people and 299 are black. There's one white lady, she said, but she lives on the other side of the tracks. Miss Smith not only told me her story, but took me to visit aging civil rights workers. 80-year-old midwives who had delivered babies in the 1920s and 1930s, traveling on muleback, sharecroppers and maids who had risked their lives to vote and to give their children a chance at an education. Miss Smith introduced me to a history that has gone unwritten and showed me acts of heroism never attributed. These, my fellow Mississippians, never made it in a history book. As one ancient sharecropper told me, when God handed out possession, sometimes I believe he gave the black man the hoe and the white man the pencil. That visit to Mayor Smith began a lifelong journey to remember my own race story. One that included the voices and the gifts and the sacrifices of the silenced. The one that underwrote my feeling of superiority and privilege. The one that acknowledges how intimately and inextricably bound I am and always will be to the Joes, to the Mayor Smiths of my world. How their story created me, and therefore silence also impoverished and perverted my own story. I concluded that the repression of story can scar the soul, but knowing our common story can heal. We recognize ourselves in each other. Through writing, and by stitching together my people's history, both black and white, I have discovered that story can lift the veil of evil that obstructs the truth. Like the old saying goes, facts can explain us, but only stories will save us.